Joining me now with reaction to yesterday's Supreme Court decision and much more is former Alaska Governor, Fox News contributor Sarah Palin. Governor, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Sean.
You know, I watched that ad. There are 7 specific taxes on the middle class, 7, as we look at this bill, and over 75% of the mandate goes to the middle class that the president said he would not tax. How big an issue is this?
It's a huge issue because there are more than 21 separate taxes within Obamacare, and as you point out, President Obama had promised Americans through ABC News, which I'm going to call out because ABC News has some chance for redemption here. They were used as a tool by President Obama in September of '09 when they let him get away with saying this wasn't a tax. Now the Supreme Court saying it is a tax, and Obama praises the Supreme Court's decision and yet still wants to say it's not really a tax. But anyway, there are 21 different taxes within Obamacare. This is huge because it's another broken promise. Obama has a list of promises now that have been absolutely decimated. The only promise he's kept, Sean, is that he would fundamentally transform America.
Well, very well said. You know, you sent out, I believe it was a tweet yesterday, it might have been on Facebook, but I think it was a tweet. The president lies and freedom dies.
Freedom dies. Yep, tweeted that.
I want to ask you specifically about this lie because David Axelrod was, earlier today, was on the Today Show, still insisting, in spite of the Supreme Court decision, this is not a tax. Watch this.
Right.
Back in 2009, the president adamantly denied that health care reform was going to be a tax on the American people. Does he now agree that this legislation, this law, is a tax?
Whatever you call it, Matt, whether you call it a mandate or a tax, what it is a penalty on the very few Americans who can afford health care, don't pay for it, end up in our emergency rooms getting free care, and then we all pay for it in the form of higher premiums.
But you know that whatever you call
fair.
it is important. In an election year and coming out of a recession, if it's called a tax, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, but what I would suggest to you is that you direct that question to Governor Romney, who was the chief proponent of this very policy when he was governor of Massachusetts.
This is a tough question, but one I think needs to be asked. Did the president, is David Axelrod, is this deceit or is this a lie? Is this a purposeful lie?
It's a lie, and it was a purposeful lie back in September of '09 when President Obama got in George Stephanopoulos' face and tried to school him and tell George, as a filter for the American public to be receiving information, tried to tell George, you're spinning this up. You're the one lying, George, when you suggest that this is a tax. Well, it is a tax, and anybody with common or economic sense applied knew that it would be a tax, and that's the only thing that would fly, making it legitimate, that's constitutional in the Supreme Court, as we found out.
You know, as we look at all of these issues, though, as they're now unfolding here, I'd like to see the media ask the president himself. You told the America, you sold this as not being a tax, and in fact, it is a tax. I think it's a big deal. When I look at the dissent, Governor, I am amazed at the language that is used, and that is you can't regulate commerce that doesn't exist. And of course, I'm talking about Justice Thomas, Scalia, Alito, and Kennedy here. You cannot rewrite Obamacare to make the tax argument work. They call the tax argument feeble. I mean, strong words really directed at the Chief Justice. The tax argument makes no sense. A mountain of evidence against the tax argument here. So I guess my question is, now that a precedent has been set, what does that mean constitutionally to you? Because I have been making the case that I think the president has been acting in a lawless manner in a variety of ways. And I want to get your thoughts on it.
A lawless manner and a very naive and short-sighted and selfish manner, a very political manner. That is the way that our president has been operating, yes. What this gets to constitutionally is it goes to the core of who we are as Americans and what the relationship is between the federal government and the individual. And this dissent, there are harsh words, very articulated very fiercely, the defense of America's economic, commercial, personal freedoms versus this overreach of Obamacare. I think people need to really start paying attention to what those 4 justices were telling us in their dissenting argument. It's very valuable. It's educational. It will certainly help the constitutional conservatives running for office this next go-around to understand what that dissent was all about and start articulating that and helping Americans understand that there's another side to this.
You know, could you imagine a governor that if George W. Bush tried to get the capital gains tax repealed and Congress wouldn't go along with it, like in the case of the immigration bill, and George W. Bush said it wouldn't be constitutional for me to do this, and then a year later he comes out and by executive fiat he does it anyway, which is what the president basically did on immigration. We had laws that were passed by Congress, signed into law by previous presidents, and he just says by executive, I'm not going to enforce that law. What would be the reaction if George Bush said, I'm not going to enforce the capital gains tax?
You know, I was privy to a wonderful conversation over the radio airwaves today between you and Mark Levin on your radio show, where you guys talked a little bit about that and gave more and more examples about President Obama basically saying, I don't care what Congress does or says, I'm going to act anyway. And that's where I'm going with the selfishness of our president and the politicizing of every single issue, the disrespect for our Constitution and the separation of powers. It's overwhelmingly bad for America in defense of our republic that he continues to get away with this.
You know, the fact that he said that he could not do something because it was not constitutional, and then within a year he does it anyway. You know, we do have, as you said, he's sworn to uphold the Constitution. We do have checks and balances. We do have separation of powers, and I think that's what's missing here. Let me ask you one question about this double whammy, because this is now the largest tax increase, or will be the largest tax increase in American history. And then we've got a double whammy, because come, you know, January 1st, the Bush tax cuts expire. What does this mean about the campaign? Is this, if Romney is elected, this happens? Is this a choice election? How would you define it if you were running?
Well, this is a choice between growing government or shrinking government to the size that it should be, and that's a smaller, smarter, less intrusive government so that the private sector can grow and thrive and prosper. It's certainly a very clear choice, but it's a very clear choice in other realms too, not just the economic realm, but the social realm, the political realm, about where America is headed, Sean. It is such a clear choice to me whether the Constitution, the Republic will be defended, or we will become a socialized nation and go the way of these European nations that are going under, because that's where Obama is headed. And so we certainly have a clear choice. Let me make a point, though, on Obamacare, and let me get your input on this. If Obamacare is so doggone great and economic and constitutional now, what is with the exemption, Sean? And sorry to pivot real quickly on this one, but where can the rest of us sign up for these exemptions, as the other, 1,000+ organizations and individuals have been able to? Yep, big labor. And we're going to be picking up the tabs then for the exemptions, the results of these exemptions. But where can the rest of us and the small businesses that will be so adversely impacted by Obamacare,
nowhere.
Where can the rest of us participate in the exemptions?
Well, for example, in the Cadillac tax that will kick in, I believe it was 2018 in the bill, there was an exemption there because unions often have plans that meet that criteria. In other words, some of the better health care plans. And that'll be taxed, but not until 2018, because, of course, they wouldn't want to impact the Democrats now. It'll be interesting to see what happens when that time comes, that they have to pay the same tax as everybody. But, Governor, stay right there. We've got to take a break. I want to ask you more about this and Fast and Furious when we come back. More.
Call it what you will. It is a step forward for America's families. And you know what? Take yes for an answer. This is a very good thing for the American people.
That was Nancy Pelosi yesterday gleefully reacting to the controversial Supreme Court ruling, and like the president and members of his administration, the former speaker is refusing to acknowledge, even still, that Obamacare is nothing short of the largest tax increase in American history. And we continue with former Alaska Governor, Fox News contributor Sarah Palin. You know, I listen to Nancy Pelosi, listen to David Axelrod, listen to the White House today. They still cannot acknowledge what this is, which is a tax. Largest tax increase in history. President wants to follow that up with a double whammy, and that is not extending the Bush tax cuts. Politically speaking, how should Congress deal with this, and how should the Romney campaign deal with this, if you were to give advice?
Well, first off, Nancy Pelosi is a dingbat, and she is the perfect spokesperson for this whole agenda of the far left running the Democrat Party. I know a lot of Democrats who are absolutely embarrassed and disgusted with what her and Harry Reid's leadership has provided the Democrat Party, and you know they want to bail out of the Democrat Party because of specifically the things that she says, the things that she does, what it is that she represents. But she's a perfect spokesperson for President Obama's Democrat Party. But what the Republican Party should do, what constitutional conservatives should do, is point out exactly what you're pointing out, is we're going to be hit with a double whammy here with this uncertainty of Obamacare that's going to be a job killer. It's the mother of all unfunded mandates. You combine that with the Bush tax cuts that will expire soon, and more of people's hard-earned dollars will be taken from them to grow government, to allow government to intrude on our commercial and private lives. Now, most Americans, I believe, don't want that, but about the 50% of Americans who aren't paying taxes and they're feeding from President Obama's hands, perhaps they will vote for such a tool, but the rest of Americans need to stand up and say no more. We want our economic freedoms, we want our opportunities for jobs, and we're not going to put up with this. And that's why we need a Congress who understands how the private sector works and what it is that the private sector needs.
What do you make of the Attorney General in the Fast and Furious case? And he's been stonewalling now for over 18 months. This is not only ill-conceived. To give guns and weapons to drug cartels, kidnappers, murderers, drug dealers is insanity. He claimed today, the Attorney General, that, oh, no, Bush had implemented this. That's not true.
No.
That is an absolute lie, just like when he said, well, the truth is evolving. You know, yeah. I mean, it makes Clinton look like, you know, the most honest guy in America when he says that. How big an impact does this have on the race?
This is more Orwellian speak coming from our Department of Justice, and it's a scary place for America to be, to have an Attorney General who is so deceptive, and this entire administration being probably the least transparent administration, I believe, in America's history. So I'm thankful that Congress, that the House of Representatives took the vote that they did to kind of open the door to allow Americans to understand that the Attorney General Holder is in contempt of Congress. They're asking for information, and he refuses to provide it. Now, as for those congressmen and women who walked out on Brian Terry's family and the American public, literally, physically walking out and not participating in the vote, I think that they too should be reprimanded via being voted out of office by their constituents, and they sent a message that it is the most disrespectful thing that they could have done to turn their back on Brian Terry's family and the American public.
All right, you said to me that Colonel Allen West would be maybe one of your top picks for VP. All right, give me 2 or 3 other names that you like.
Oh, my goodness. I like people who aren't necessarily involved in politics. They're kind of on the periphery. Smart people, like we brought up Mark Levin's name, Thomas Sowell.
Could you imagine Mark Levin? Maybe Secretary of Defense, I don't know.
He'd be kicking butt and taking names,
yeah,
and that's exactly what we need right now, Sean. We need people who are going to engage in relentless reform, sudden and relentless reform. We can't just manage the decline that President Obama has created for America. We need to turn things around, so we need characters in there who are bold and will defend our republic and do the right thing for the people, putting government back on the side of the people.
All right, Governor, it's always good to see you, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.